Okay, hello and welcome. So today we're going to be talking about IELTS speaking, and in particular we're going to focus on part one of the speaking exam. Okay, so in part one you will be asked about topics that are familiar to you. So this is the easiest part of the speaking exam because you basically know the answers. They're asking you about your own experience, your own life, what you like, what you don't like, and of course you know the answer to that. However, of course, we still need to speak well. It's really important that you do well in the first part. Firstly, because of course you're going to be really nervous, and the more nervous you get, the worse your performance will be. So it's important that you use this to build up your confidence, and the more confident you are, the more likely you're going to be the more likely you are to do better on the harder parts of the exam. The other thing, though, is because first impressions count. They say that when you have a job interview, they choose whether you're going to be successful or not in the first 30 seconds when you walk into the room. Well, it's kind of a little bit like this in the IELTS exam too. They're not going to judge you on 30 seconds. They're not going to judge you on how you look, but this is where the examiner's starting to think, well, what kind of score will I give her? What kind of score will I give him? Oh, this person's probably 5. Oh, this person maybe 6.5. And it's very unlikely after they get a kind of number in their head that your score will go up. It's more likely that afterwards you mess up and your score goes down. So it's important that you have a good start, that you impress. Okay, let's take a look at some examples then. So one of the topics that they might talk about is language. Now, when they begin asking you questions, they will always tell you the topic that the questions are going to be about. So, for example, they might say to you, let's talk about languages. And then following on from this, they're going to ask you 3, 4, even 5 questions related to this. Today, because this is a little bit shorter than normal, we're just going to focus on 2 questions. So the first question is, how many languages can you speak? And the second question is, how useful will English be to you in the future? Okay, so the first thing we need to do, of course, is answer the question. But it's important how you answer the question. So, for instance, they might ask you, how many languages can you speak? And you say, 3. I've answered the question, but the problem is what I've shown is I understand English and I can say a word in English, but I haven't shown the examiner I know how to speak English properly. I haven't used a sentence. I haven't used any grammar. Even though I'm a native speaker, if I just said that, they're not going to give me a high score. So we need to, of course, answer with full sentences. So, for instance, they might say, how many languages can you speak? And I say, I can speak 3 languages. Again, it's better than the first answer. I've shown that I can speak a sentence, although I've basically copied the question. But I also haven't shown that I can speak really well. I'm just showing that I can speak a basic sentence. And of course we want to impress. We want to show the examiner how well we actually speak this. So it's really important that we don't just answer the question, that we build on the question, we develop it, we add more information to this. Now, how do we do that? Well, there are several things that we can do. So one of the things we can do is to focus on what. We could focus on the idea of why. We could talk about how. We could talk about where. We could talk about when. We could talk about who. So let's look at some examples of this. Okay, so the first question is, how many languages can you speak? Well, what you can do is tell the examiner not just how many, but what languages you speak. So for instance, I might say, I can speak 3 languages, so English, Chinese, and French. And then because I want to say a little bit more, I can add, I also learnt a few phrases in Italian, but I've forgotten most of those phrases now. Okay, so this way I'm answering the question, and I'm also showing off my English a little bit more. It's really important that your answer is longer than the question. You should be speaking more than the examiner. This is a speaking exam, not a listening exam. Okay, or maybe I could say I can speak English, French, and Chinese, as well as a little bit of Italian, but I've forgotten most of the Italian because I never use it. Io parlato italiano. Okay. Or maybe I say, although I studied several languages at school, I can only speak one language properly, English. Sorry. I don't. Okay. Next, another way to develop this is to talk about why. So for instance, I can say, I can speak 3 languages, English, Chinese, and French. So that tells you what I can speak. But then I can also talk about why. So I could go on to say, I was made to study French at school. And then I chose to study Chinese when I came to live in Taiwan. Or maybe I could say, I can speak English, French, and Chinese, as well as a little bit of Italian. A few years ago, I traveled by myself in Italy for a month, so I learned a few phrases. Actually, I also have a few Italian friends. It's kind of fun to say a few words to them. Or maybe I'm really bad at languages. I might say this. Or, although I studied French at school, I can only speak one language properly, English. I hated my French teacher, who was really terrible, so I just gave up. We could talk about how. So how well you speak it. So I might say, I can speak 3 languages. I speak English I speak English fluently, but not just then. And my Chinese and French are pretty good for everyday situations in my life. Good. Or maybe I say, I can speak English fluently, as it's my native language. I'm not bad at reading French, but my speaking has deteriorated because I never practice it. I haven't been to France for a long time. Living in Taiwan, well, I get lots of opportunity to practice Chinese, so that's actually pretty good. Or maybe I say, although I studied French at school, I speak it really badly, and I've forgotten most of it. So in all honesty, I can only speak one language well, which is English. I could talk about where. So for instance, I can speak 3 languages, English, Chinese, and French. I learned French when I was at school, and then began to study Chinese when I came to live in Taiwan. Or maybe I can speak English, French, and Chinese, as well as a little bit of Italian. I learned French at school, Chinese at the Mandarin Language Center in Taipei, and I taught myself to say a few phrases in Italian. Also, I could talk about when. So for instance, I might say, I can speak 3 languages, English, Chinese, and French. I studied French for about 7 or 8 years at school, and then studied Chinese full-time for 3 years when I first came to Taiwan. Or I can speak English, French, and Chinese, as well as a little bit of Italian. I spent years studying French and Chinese, and about a month learning a few useful phrases in Italian. although I studied French for many years, I never really learned anything. So honestly, I can only speak one language properly, English. Okay, and then finally, we could also talk about who. So for instance, I might say, I can speak 3 languages, English, Chinese, and French. I studied French with my classmates at school, then studied Chinese with students from many different countries when I first came to Taiwan. Or I can speak English, French, and Chinese, as well as a little bit of Italian. I spent years studying French and Chinese in small classes of about 10 students each, and I taught myself Italian, which is why it's so bad. Although I studied French for many years, my classmates were really naughty and noisy. So I was never able to really learn anything. Therefore, English is my only language. Now, of course, this takes practice. So, you've just been listening to me. Now, what you need to do is go and practice. So, what I suggest is that you stop this video and you have a go at answering this question. So, how many languages you can speak? And try to answer it in different ways. Have a go at talking about what languages you speak. Have a go at talking about how well you speak these languages. Talk about where you learnt them or where you speak them. Talk about when you learnt them. Talk about who you talk to, or talk about who you learnt these languages with, and so on and so on. And ideally, don't just give one answer. Have a go at giving 2 or 3 answers like this. And by doing this, you'll build up your ability to come up with ideas. It's kind of, the scary thing. You're in an exam, you're nervous. It's really hard to respond. So basically, you need to be able to do it in your sleep without actually thinking about it. And this, of course, takes practice. One of the things that I learned to do when I was studying Chinese was when I'd sit on the bus, I would practice doing these kind of things. I would imagine my teacher asking me a question, and I would have a go at answering the question in 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 different ways. Or I would imagine that I was in Starbucks and somebody started talking to me, and so I had a conversation. Or I would imagine that I was at a job interview and I was being asked, how many languages can you speak? And so on. It's a really good way to just practice and practice. It's also a really good way to actually develop thinking in a different language. One of the most important things when you speak English, you need to be able to think in English. And that's basically, you need to practice and practice so that you can do it without actually having to think about the grammar that you need, the tenses that you need. It becomes something that is automatic. Okay, so let's look at the next question. So this asks, how useful will English be to you in the future? And again, we could just say, useful, but it's not a very good answer. So we need to add on this. In the future, speaking English will be useful. Again, it's the bare minimum. It shows that I can speak a sentence, but it doesn't show that my English is very good. It just shows that my English is a little bit limited. So again, we can build on this by using these different questions. So we can talk about what, about why, how, where, when, and also who. Okay, so for instance, maybe we're talking about what? So we can talk about what situations, what places you might use this. So maybe I say English will be very useful when I'm studying in England. I'll be able to study at university as well as deal with everyday situations. Maybe I will be able to make friends with people there. Or maybe thinking further into the future, I plan to work in an international company in the future. English will be essential in my job, as I will need to talk to people who speak many different languages, and hopefully I'll get paid a lot. We can talk about why. So maybe I say it will be essential as I plan to study for a postgraduate degree in England, and I will need it for my studies and for my everyday life. You know, for instance, traveling on the bus, going to the store to buy my coffee, and getting internet so that I can call my friends at home. Or maybe besides my postgraduate studies abroad, I will need to use English in my professional life as I plan to be an airline pilot flying all over the world. So I will need English when I'm flying the airplane, but also when I'm in the different cities that I stay in. Or although I enjoy English and it's useful when traveling, I think it won't be that important as I plan to work at my father's company. We only do business in Taiwan. So yeah, it will be useful when I'm studying, but after that, it's just going to be fun. We can talk about where, when, and how. So for example, maybe I'd say it will be really useful when I'm studying in England, as well as in other countries when I go on business trips in the future. Maybe I will go to America or to Singapore, and I will need to talk to people whose first language is not Chinese. English is vital these days, not only for postgraduate students, but for my future professional life. I expect to use it answering emails, taking part in conference calls, as well as on business trips. Or maybe we talk about how. I expect it to be vital. It will help me to communicate clearly and conveniently, whether through email or conference calls, and this will enable me to rapidly gain promotion and success, and maybe I will be famous one day. And then finally, again, we can talk about who. So when I study abroad, it will be incredibly important, as it will mean I will be able to talk to my professors, but also to make friends with classmates from all over the world, who I hope will become lifelong friends. Or maybe in the future, I plan to become a sales manager for an international company. I will need English to talk to my colleagues, clients, and suppliers. Or maybe, although I don't think I'll need English in my everyday life, it will be useful in the future when I go on holiday to talk to other people. English is the international language of tourism. So I'll be able to order food in restaurants. I'll be able to go to different tourist sites and get the information I need. So this will be great. Okay, so again, what we can do here is you need to actually practice this. So again, I suggest that you stop the video, you take a look at this question, have a go at answering this. How useful will English be to me in the future? Talk about what, talk about why, when, how, where, and who, and so on. Okay, so thank you very much. So that's our time for today.